All right, thank you. Your next witness, please.
Thank you, Your Honor. The state calls Agent Kimberly Mears.
Come forward, be sworn. Please clerk. Left hand on the Bible, raise your right one.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you about to give in this case will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? I do. Please have a seat, state your full name for the record.
Why don't you step up?
My name is Kimberly Mears. Last name is spelled M-E-A-R-S.
Agent Mears, good morning.
Hi.
Can you tell this jury who you are, where you're employed, and what you do?
I am employed by the South Carolina Law Enforcement Division, which is commonly known as SLED, and I am a forensic scientist in the Latent Print Department.
How long have you been employed at SLED?
I've been with SLED since 2007, specifically with the Latent Print Department since 2011.
And prior to that, prior to 2007, did you have any additional work, experience, training, education?
Just college.
Okay. And can you talk about some of your training as it pertains to latent prints?
Once I was hired by the Latent Print Department, I completed their in-house training program, which typically lasts about a year. I also completed the Latent Print Examiner training program sponsored by the National Institute of Justice, which lasted about 10 weeks. Both of those training programs have modules and courses that cover all aspects of fingerprint work, all the way from the history of fingerprints, the growth of fingerprints, to doing comparisons and writing reports.
Do you regularly participate in trainings and continuing education?
Yes, I regularly attend various workshops, conferences, and courses as they become available.
Have you testified in court before?
I have.
And have you been qualified as an expert?
Yes, I have, about 25 times.
All right. And what have you been qualified as an expert in?
The wording changes a little bit. Fingerprint analysis and comparisons, fingerprint examination, something along those lines.
All right, thank you. All right, this time the state would offer Agent Mears as an expert in fingerprint analysis and comparison.
No objection, Your Honor.
You're so qualified.
Thank you, Your Honor. All right, Agent Mears, let's start with the obvious question. What is a latent print?
So first, let me explain what a fingerprint is. If you look at the palm side of your hand, you will see tiny little raised lines on your skin. Those are called ridges. And on your fingertips, those ridges form specific patterns, either arches, loops, or whorls. On the joints of your fingers and the palm of your hand, they have a specific ridge flow unique to the area of the hand. This is also true for your toes and the skin on the bottoms of your feet. Within the overall pattern or ridge flow, the ridges are not just running uniformly. One ridge may fork into two, which is called a bifurcation. One ridge may just stop, which is known as an ending ridge, or a ridge may be formed just in the shape of a dot. Those are called ridge characteristics, and those ridge characteristics within the overall pattern or flow make up your print. The word latent means hidden or invisible, meaning it needs some form of development to be seen. So those ridges are lined with sweat pores. Throughout the day, you exude sweat, you touch greasy foods or oily items, and that moisture accumulates on your ridges. When you go to touch an object, that moisture is transferred from your skin to that surface, corresponding to the ridges on your skin.
So you mentioned touching an object and transferring that material. Is there a print that is left behind, so to speak, every time you touch something?
No, there's not. Leaving a portion of a print or leaving a comparison quality print is a chance event that depends on the person themselves. how dry their skin may be, how rough the skin might be, depends on the surface being touched, how textured, or if it's fabric or something hard. And it also depends on the environment that that object is in. If it's outside in the direct sun, if it has been rained on or been washed, those would all affect leaving a print.
All right. Are you able to determine when you are provided with a latent print to examine, are you able to determine the time frame in which that print was left in whatever location it was found upon?
No, we are not.
So in other words, you can't timestamp a print.
If a print is found on a countertop and it is known that that countertop had just been thoroughly washed, that might help, but generally no, we cannot age a fingerprint.
Okay. So what is your process for taking items of evidence in a case and making comparisons among them?
First, I do an inventory of my evidence, make sure I have what I am supposed to have. I then label the evidence with the SLED lab number, the item number, and my initials. And I then go forward to determine if any print is comparison quality, meaning if there's enough information there to compare with a known fingerprint of an individual to then compare to determine if the individual made that print, did not make that print, or if I'm unable to tell for some reason.
Were you provided with a number of items of evidence in the case at hand?
Yes, I was.
Some of those were known standards, correct?
Correct.
And some of those were latent prints lifted from other locations and other items of evidence throughout the case. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
All right. I want to show you what's been marked previously as State's Exhibit 6 for identification only, and we take a look at that.
Okay.
Do you recognize that?
Yes, I do.
What do you recognize that to be?
These are the known fingerprints of Nathaniel Rowland, and they are marked with my initials and the SLED lab number and the item number.
And did you receive those fingerprints in the proper chain of custody?
Yes, I did.
And did you then use them in order to make comparisons in this case?
Yes, I did.
All right, this time the state would move to introduce State's Exhibit number 6 into evidence.
Interjection.
This was so much work for these guys.
It is admitted.
Thank you, Your Honor. All right, now let's talk a little bit about the comparison process. Tell the jury a little bit about how you compare a latent to a known standard.
The ridge characteristics, the ridge endings, the bifurcations, and the dots within the overall pattern type or within the overall ridge flow are what I'm looking at to determine if there's enough information there to compare. I look at those characteristics and their relationship to each other within the latent or the unknown print and look for them in the known print as well, going throughout the print looking for similarities of the ridge characteristics or any disagreement.
Once you've done that with a particular comparison, what are the types of conclusions that you could reach on a given item?
So the overall method we use for doing comparisons is called ACE-V. ACE standing for analysis, comparison, and evaluation, the V standing for verification. The analysis portion is where I look at a print to determine, is this from ridge detailed skin? Is this from a end joint of a finger? Is this from a palm? Is this from a foot? I then determine if there's enough information there to compare to a known print. Comparison phase is where I compare the unknown to the known. The evaluation is where I come to my conclusion of either an identification, meaning this unknown print came from the same individual who left these known prints, an elimination or not identified, meaning someone else left this unknown print. Also, I can come to a no value, which means there's just not enough there to compare to a known standard. Also, I can use an inconclusive result, which means I'm unable to come to a conclusion for a specific reason. The V then is the verification of my work by another examiner, where they do their own analysis, comparison, and evaluation.
Thank you. In the case at hand, you were provided with a number of items to make comparisons to known prints. Is that correct?
That is correct.
All right. And overall, in your comparisons, were there some identifications made on some items in this case?
Yes, there were.
And for other items, was there no identification made?
Yes, there were.
Okay. All right, let's talk about, did you generate a report as a result of your work in this case?
I did.
Okay. If you wouldn't mind, do you have it in front of you?
I do.
All right. I'm going to draw your attention first to your item number 104. That is listed as a multi-tool.
Okay.
What did you learn in your comparison of the multi-tool?
So that item, I chemically processed for fingerprints, and the result was no value, meaning I could tell that the item had been touched, but the overall ridge detail from the skin was either not of comparison quality or smudged or for some reason not enough to compare or not of quality to compare with a known.
So let me make sure I understand that correctly. You didn't actually take that print and compare it to Nathaniel Rowland or Samantha Josephson or anyone else because the print itself on the item was not sufficient for doing so. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. Next, let's go to your items 27 and 28. I believe if you could tell us what items 27 and 28 are referring to.
Item 27 is an empty 16 fluid ounce Bud Light aluminum bottle. Item 28 is an empty 12 fluid ounce Bud Light can. Both of these items were processed for fingerprints, and for both of these items, the result was no fingerprint evidence was observed, which means there are not even smudges present on the item. It was either too covered in dirt, had been washed, or the prints just were not left in the first place. There was no ridge detail present on the item at all.
Next, I'm going to go to items 32 through 35, which, if you could tell the court about each one of those. Let's start with item 32. Is that the LA's Totally Awesome Cleaner bottle?
That is correct.
All right.
That item was chemically processed, and the result was no value.
Okay. And item 33, what was that?
The container of Clorox bleach germicidal wipes, the result for that was also no value.
34?
34 is the Dollar General Home window cleaner spray bottle, again chemically processed, and the result was no value.
All right. And then lastly, number 35.
The Top Job bleach bottle, processed for prints, and the result was no fingerprint evidence observed, meaning no portion of a print at all.
Okay. Thank you. Number 36, item 36, your item 36.
That was a set of wall hair clippers processed for fingerprints, and the result was no value for comparison.
Okay, and then in regards to items 38 and 39, if you could talk about those together.
Item 38 was 2 blue plastic gloves, and item 39 was 1 blue plastic glove. Both of those were processed, and the result for both of those was no value.
And the item 38 blue plastic glove, does your report indicate where those gloves are purported to have come from?
Said to be from the front passenger door panel.
And same question for item 39.
39 is said to be from around the clear spray bottle in driver floorboard.
And again, your conclusion regarding those two was what?
Both of those were no value.
So can you explain to the jury, we're talking about plastic gloves, some of the reasons why you may have reached, why there may be a situation where there's no value for comparison on gloves?
If you've worn plastic gloves for any extended period of time, you'll know that your hands will sweat. That sweat can be too much to leave a print. If you have too much moisture on your hand, then that causes the ridge detail to just appear like moisture drops, like if your car's been out in the rain. And that can obscure leaving a perfectly left print. Also, if you think about putting a glove on and the way you would take it off, you're kind of smearing it across your skin, which could obscure any perfectly laid print.
Thank you. Turn your attention now to your item 55. What is that and what did you find?
That is a latent lift indicated as coming from the rear passenger door exterior door handle, and it was no value as well.
And item 108.
That was a Family Dollar bag containing miscellaneous wipes, paper towels, and gloves. It was chemically processed, and the result was no value.
Now, as you mentioned earlier, there were some items that you examined that you did make some identifications. Is that right?
That is correct.
All right. I'd like to turn your attention to item 113. Your Honor, may the witness step down?
Yes.
Thank you. Step down. Show you what's been marked as states 340 for ID. If you could just look at it yourself first and describe what that is.
This is the fingerprint chart I have prepared.
In regards to item 113,
It's actually 113.1.1 with item 87.
okay, and this chart was created in the ordinary course of business?
Yes, that's correct.
All right, thank you. Your Honor, at this time we'd offer states 340.
No objection, Your Honor.
Very good.
Now I'm going to ask you to trade places with me, if you don't mind, so that the court reporter can hear you. Do you recall, and I'm sorry, I made you abandon your report, do you recall what item 113 is from?
Item 113 is a crime scene image that is of the rear interior window from the driver's side of the vehicle.
Okay, the rear interior window of the driver's side of the vehicle. And that was an image of that?
That is correct.
Okay,
So
all right, and the other side?
this is from my item 87, which were the post-mortem inked footprints said to be from Samantha Josephson.
All right, and so again, just by way of review, when you say known regarding Samantha Josephson's print, that is because what?
It was taken on purpose from a known individual in a controlled environment.
All right, and then unknown in regards to 113 from the window.
That was latent, otherwise known as unknown, from the scene because we don't know who left that print.
All right, now as you examined these two or compared these two to one another, what was your analysis?
So this kind of describes what I was explaining before, where we look at the overall, it's easier to see on this side, we look at the overall flow of the ridges, which on this image are the black lines. We look for agreement between the overall flow between the unknown and known prints. We then look within the flow at what the ridges are doing. We're looking for the ridge endings, the ridge bifurcations, and any dots that may be present. I first look for them in the unknown print. I'll locate kind of a focal point or a cluster of ridge characteristics, and then I look for it in what should be the same area on the known print. And so that's what the letters with the red lines are pointing at, are different characteristics that I found within the print and within relation to each other that are in agreement between both the unknown and the known.
And what conclusion did you reach regarding this particular comparison of the print from the latent print from the window inside the vehicle to the known print of Ms. Josephson?
It was identified,
Meaning what?
meaning that the person who left the inked impression also left the unknown impression.
Thank you. You indicated that was your item 113.1.1.
That is correct.
Can you describe kind of generally why there would be various sub numbers of item numbers like that?
So item 113 is a DVD of crime scene images. So I had to sub-item, which is 113.1, the specific image on that entire CD or DVD of images. So 113.1 is the actual file or image 979 on the CD. And within that image, I had to then further sub-item 0.1.1, the specific impression that I'm referring to when doing my comparison.
All right, and so did you actually, for 113.1, did you actually make comparisons for, I believe, 4 different parts? Is that the right word of that?
4 different impressions represented on that same image. So item 113.1 is image 979. I then have items 113.1.1 through 113.1.4. All of those referring to different impressions within that same image.
And what were your conclusions regarding each of those impressions?
All 4 of those were identified to the footprints bearing the name Samantha Josephson.
Can you tell what part of the foot, what print that came from, say, part of the foot, the toes, anything of that nature?
Item 113.1.1, 113.1.2, 113.1.3, and 113.1.4 all came from the toes of her right foot.
Okay. And then moving to 113.2, what is that? What is the latent impression from 113.2.1?
That is also a crime scene image of the rear driver's side door window interior.
And what was your conclusion regarding that comparison?
That image had 1 impression sub-item from it, so 113.2.1 was also identified to the footprints of Samantha Josephson.
Which part of the foot made that impression?
That impression came from the heel area of her left foot.
So the previous item you said was the right foot, but this one's from the left foot, is that right?
That is correct.
And then lastly, in regards to this particular set of impressions, 113.3.
That is an additional crime scene image and had 1 impression sub-item from it. So 113.3.1 was also identified to the footprints of Samantha Josephson.
Which part of her foot?
This was the right foot plantar area, which is essentially under your smaller toes.
Thank you. All right, I'd like to turn your attention to your item 37.
Okay?
states number 26 that's already in evidence as the Yankee candle bag. That's your item 37, correct?
Yes, it is.
Okay, thank you. What comparisons did you make regarding this item?
It was processed for prints. I then sub-itemed 3 impressions from that bag. So 37.3 was compared but not identified to any of the names involved in this case. Item 37.4 and 37.5 were both compared and identified to the footprints of Samantha Josephson.
Did you notate which part of her foot?
37.4 is from her right foot, toe number 1. 37.5 is also from her right foot, from the ball area below the big toe.
Thank you. Turning your attention to items 128 and 131. We'll start with item 128.
Okay.
What is that item?
That is a black trash bag containing a paper towel roll, 1 Dollar General bag containing a gray bath towel, and 1 IGA bag containing a bed sheet and miscellaneous wipes.
What identifications did you make in regards to that item?
An impression was developed on the exterior of the trash bag that was identified to prints bearing the name Maria Howard. And 2 more prints also on the exterior of the black trash bag were also identified to the known prints bearing the name Maria Howard.
Okay, thank you. All right, next, your item 22. I'm going to show you what's previously been admitted into evidence as State's Exhibit 56. And can you describe, according to your report, what this is?
1 torn envelope with writing. Yes, that is it.
Okay. All right, and did you conduct a series of comparisons regarding the envelope?
Yes, I did.
All right, let's talk. There were multiple comparisons, correct?
There were 2.
Okay, let's start with item 22.4.
The impression was developed and then identified with known fingerprints bearing the name Xavier Marquise McFadden.
Okay, and then let's talk about item 22.3. Still talking about the envelope, correct?
That is correct. The fingerprint developed as item 22.3 was identified with the known standards bearing the name Nathaniel David Rowland.
All right. Now my question goes back to something we discussed a little bit earlier. Can you talk again about time frames as it relates to how fingerprints may be on an item, how long a fingerprint can stay on an item, things of that nature?
Things such as knowing when an item was clean, knowing when an item was wiped down may help, but generally we are unable to determine when a print was left on an item.
So is it fair to say then that if I handed my paper to you and you took it back to your office and set it down on the desk, and some years later you found it and it was compared for prints of some sort, that there'd be no way to tell when, if you found a comparison to my print, would it have been left on there?
That is correct.
Okay. All right, and I have one more item to ask you about, and that is item number 40.
That is a roll of pink duct tape.
So you state 29 is already in evidence? Is that duct tape?
Yes, it is.
Okay. And what was your analysis of the duct tape?
That was chemically processed, and 3 impressions were then sub-itemed. All of them were identified to the known fingerprints bearing the name Nathaniel David Rowland. And those prints are on the interior cardboard roll.
Not on the tape on the outside, but rather on the inside?
Correct.
Agent Mears, thank you. Those are all my questions at this time.
Thank you.
By the defense.
May it please the court, Your Honor?
Yes.
Good morning.
Hi.
So, when you get involved with doing your part of the forensic testing, you're not going out and getting the information. The information is the items that they want tested are sent to you.
That is correct.
And when they arrive to your department, they're usually stored in some sort of evidence bag.
That is correct.
And that's because the crime scene folks had gone out there, collected it, they logged it into the evidence room, and the request was put in for print comparisons.
Yes, that is correct.
And when you get the bag, the only information that you know about that item is what's on the bag, right?
They will generally write a brief description where the item is said to be from. They will notate the lab number, item number, and their initials on the bag. And then within our computer system, they will indicate what analysis or what testing they want on that item.
Okay. So when you get that turned over, you don't know and you don't have any way of determining what is important and what might not be important, right?
That's correct.
The request is made, you get the item, you do your comparison.
Correct.
And when you complete your comparison, do you upload it to y'all's internal system, the B system, I think somebody called it?
As far as my worksheets and my
Yes, ma'am.
report, yes, that is correct.
And after you upload it, it's not your responsibility to make sure that investigators get it and review it. You do your part, you upload it, and then you move on to the next case you have to work on, right?
That is correct.
And you just testified, well, when Mr. Goldberg started asking you questions, you said there were some other items that you were able to get prints off of, but you also noted that there were more potential prints, just not of the caliber for testing or comparison, right?
Right. Some of the items that I processed were no value.
And you actually noticed more ridge details on specific items, like item 22. You could tell that it had been touched more, but you were not able to do a comparison with those other areas.
That is correct.
Okay. And you testified that clearly you can't date a fingerprint.
Right.
So if I got a piece of mail that had my car registration in it, and I picked up the envelope, opened the envelope, took my car registration out, and put that envelope somewhere, theoretically my prints would stay on that envelope.
Theoretically, yes.
If somebody else touched the envelope and, opened it, moved it, did anything with it, and put it down, and nobody touched it again, that person's print would be there.
There's a chance, yes.
And you don't know how many different prints are on item 22, right?
No, I do not.
You are only able to get 2, or to compare to.
To compare to, yes. The rest of the overall envelope had various touches across the front and the back.
And you testified that item 22.3, you identified that as being from Mr. Rowland?
That is correct.
And that was found on you lifted that one from the front part of the envelope.
The front side of the envelope, yes.
And item 22.4, you identified that as Xavier McFadden.
Correct.
And that was located on the back part of the envelope.
That is correct.
And again, there's all different touches throughout the envelope, but those are the 2 you were able to lift.
Process and photograph, these weren't exactly physical latent lifts, and the rest of the impressions that were noted on the item were determined to be no value, so they were not then sub-itemed for comparison.
Now in item 128.5, the black trash bag,
Yes.
do you recall, other than it saying a black trash bag, do you recall where that bag was located?
The packing slip from our computer system said that it was from a trash can with a specific ID number located in Maria Howard's backyard.
Okay. But outside of that, that's the only information that you had about this item.
That's correct.
And it was Maria Howard's fingerprints that you were able to identify on item 128.5,
Yes, that is correct.
on 128.6,
Yes.
on 128.9.
Yes.
And you also identified her print on item 131.5. What is that item?
Item 131
Yes,
is a Family Dollar bag containing clothing. Item 131.5 is a impression I developed on the bag, and that was identified to Maria Howard.
Yes, ma'am. And does the submission that you got identify where that bag was located?
Item 131 is said to be from the trash can, and I believe it is the same ID number of the trash can.
And I'm going to hand you what's already in evidence in State's Exhibit 6. That's the fingerprint card for Nathaniel Rowland.
Yes,
Does it have his, his stats at the top of it? Height, weight?
yes, it does.
Can you please tell us what that says?
Sex is male, race is black, height is 5'8", weight is 160, eyes are brown, hair is black.
Thank you, ma'am. And your testing has nothing to do with DNA, right? That's a different department.
In my processing, I created some swabs for DNA, but then they were transferred to that department and I did no testing on them.
Okay. Begging the court's indulgence. No further questions.
Any read I write.
Very briefly, Judge. Agent Mears, if someone is wearing gloves, what impact does that have on their ability to leave a latent print on an item?
You will not leave a print on an item if you have a glove blocking the moisture on the skin from the surface you are touching.
Thank you.
Anything further?
Agent Mears, if somebody doesn't touch an item, will they leave a print?
No, they will not.
Thank you.
You may step down. Thank you. And you may call your next witness.
Thank you, Your Honor. State calls Verona Herrera.
Lord to be sworn. Face the clerk, left hand, raise your right.
You solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give in this case will be the truth, no truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do.
Please have a seat. State your full name for the record.
Step up.
My name is Verona Herrera.
Good afternoon, Ms. Herrera. Where are you currently employed,
DHEC, the Department of Health and Environmental Control for South Carolina.
and how long have you worked there?
Approximately a year and a half.
Prior to that, where did you work?
The South Carolina Law Enforcement Division.
And how long did you work there?
Approximately 11 and a half years.
And while at SLED, what did you do?
Evidence processing technician and a forensic serologist.
What is a forensic serologist?
Forensic serologist takes evidence from a crime scene and tries to identify the body fluid on the evidence. Usually it's body fluid in question, blood, semen, saliva.
And how long did you do this?
It was about 6 years that I did serology. It's a little bit unique because evidence processing became a part of serology. So evidence processing is taking those items of evidence, looking for blood stains or areas that could be semen or saliva, and doing quick color change tests, or collecting possible skin cells from areas on clothing or guns or car parts. And then the serology was additional testing to try to identify those body fluids if they were present. So I started out as evidence processing. When the serology department or duties were added to that, then I became a serologist.
And did you get any training in performing and conducting serology testing?
Through SLED, there's an in-house training program, yes, for both the evidence processing and the serology.
And can you tell the jury a little bit about your training?
I worked under a court qualified analyst, watching them process evidence. Then I started processing evidence under their supervision. I had to pass a written test, an oral test, a mock court test, and practice evidence to make sure that I could perform the duties that I was going to be performing.
And have you ever been qualified as an expert in the field of serology?
Yes, ma'am.
This time you are asked to have Ms. Herrera qualified as an expert in the field of serology.
Any objection?
Your Honor, may we approach?
Yes. Qualified.
Thank you. So you were explaining to the jury about serology. Specifically, what are you testing for when you're doing a serology test?
It depends on the body fluid in question. If it is blood, there's a presumptive test for blood. It's a quick color change test. The area of question would be swabbed, and then chemicals applied to that swab. It would change to a bright pink color if there's a possibility blood is there. We can also go on and identify blood, not human blood, but we can say that the substance is blood by doing a further testing on that swab. Semen is similar. There's a quick color change test that you would swab the area, add the chemical, it would turn purple within a minute to indicate there's a possibility that could be semen, and it could be taken for further testing for the P30, which is a component of the liquid portion of semen, and we also looked at for sperm cells or spermatozoa under the microscope. Saliva testing is presumptive testing only from swabs or cuttings from the material. If you think say a mask, if you think there's saliva on the mask, we could cut an area of that and test it. Also, hair can be evaluated. If there's a root material on the hair, then that can be forwarded for further testing as well.
So I'm going to move you to this case. How did you become involved in the murder of Samantha Josephson?
I was assigned the case when it was submitted to the laboratory.
And so how does something get submitted to the laboratory?
The agency or our SLED's crime scene personnel would bring the evidence to the laboratory. It gets entered into the computer system, tracking system. It's given a unique lab number, and each item that's submitted is given a unique item number within that lab number.
And so when you say, are you getting the items as we see them, or do you get swabs or cuttings, or what do you receive?
Usually all of the above. I could receive swabs from other departments. It could be swabs from the actual crime scene. It could be clothing, linens, car parts, guns, just anything that's taken from the crime scene could come through the evidence processing and serology department. Then those are narrowed down to swabs or cuttings so that they're much smaller to handle. Then those would be, anything that was positive would be forwarded on for further analysis.
So do you have your report in front of you?
I do, both of them, yes ma'am.
So I'm going to refer you to what you have listed as item 38.1, just to give us an idea.
Yes ma'am.
What is that particular item?
Swabs taken from the cuff area and in between the fingers of item 38.
And do you know what item 38 is?
I do not.
Okay, and that's fine. What I want to ask you about is it says item forwarded to DNA section. What does that mean?
In this case, I was compiling the evidence so that the DNA analyst could get all of it at one time. This item did not need to be tested for a body fluid, so it went straight to the DNA analyst. I never opened that item.
So if we see on here where it says item forwarded, you just send it straight on. Is that fair to say?
No, because I also put that designation on anything that I test and then send forward.
Okay. So I'm going to move to what you have listed as item 104.1.
Yes,
What
ma'am.
is that?
Camo colored multi-tool from white plastic Family Dollar bag number 2.
And what is the result of that testing?
There was a swab from the serrated blade of the camo colored multi-tool, which is item 104.1. Presumptive testing for blood was positive, and that item was forwarded to the DNA section.
So what does it mean if it comes back as presumptive testing for positive?
So like I said, the quick color change test, where it would turn bright pink if there's a possibility blood is there, is a very sensitive test. There can be very minute amounts of blood there, and it will change color. But it's also not specific. Other chemicals in the environment or other items can cause it to turn positive. So that's considered a presumptive test for blood. There's a possibility that blood is there, but it needs further testing.
Okay, and I'm going to move on to item 106.1. What was that?
106.1 is the swab from the finger of the black right-hand glove from the white basket from the closet left of the bed in Maria Howard's bedroom, and that is 7525 Mountain Brook Drive, Unit C.
And what was the result of that testing?
The presumptive test for blood was positive, and the item was forwarded to the DNA section.
And what about 107.1?
107.1 is swab of cuff of black left-hand glove from white plastic bag, Family Dollar bag number 2.
What was the result of that test?
The presumptive test for blood was positive, and the item was forwarded to the DNA section.
All right. And what about 108.3.2?
108.3.2 is cutting from 1 wad of possible paper towels from miscellaneous contents removed from bag from item 108.
And what was the results of that testing?
Presumptive testing for blood was positive, and the item was forwarded to the DNA section.
And can you tell Jerry what happens do you know what happens when it's forwarded to the DNA section?
They take it through the process to develop the DNA profile, which they compare to a known standard.
So you don't do that, that's someone else's job, fair to say?
Correct, yes.
So item 108.3.4, is that still we're still talking about the glove?
Yes, that is a swab from the entire exterior as it was submitted of 3 gloves from miscellaneous contents removed from bag from item 108.
And on all of those items, what was the result?
Presumptive testing for blood was positive, and the items were forwarded to the DNA section.
And for item 125.1,
Swab from the sole of the right shoe of pair of pink Adidas size 9K shoes from closet underneath the stairs from Maria Howard's resident. Was presumptive testing for blood was positive, and then the item was forwarded to the DNA section.
all right. And 127, what was the result of that?
Gray pillowcase from pillow from right side of bed, interiors by design from Maria Howard's bedroom. Presumptive testing for blood was negative.
So that means it wasn't blood?
The presumptive test was negative. I can't say absolute certainty it was not blood, but it is not likely to be blood.
And is that common or uncommon?
It is fairly common, yes, ma'am.
What about 128.1.1?
Cutting from the towel from miscellaneous contents removed from bags of item 128. The presumptive test for blood was positive, and the item was forwarded to the DNA section.
And 128.1.2?
That's a cutting from the pillowcase from the miscellaneous contents removed from bags of item 128. Presumptive testing for blood was positive, and the item was forwarded to the DNA section.
And I'm going to move on to item 130.1.1. What is that?
Cutting from the left side hem area of tan shirt removed from item 130.
And what's item 130?
I do not know.
Well, what is 130.1?
That is the tan shirt.
Okay, so this is, and then this 130.1.1 is a cutting from that?
That is correct, yes.
Okay, and what was the result of that?
Presumptive testing for blood was positive, and it was forwarded to the DNA section.
And how about 131.1.1.1?
Point 1.1.1. Cutting from right cuff of shirt.
Yes, what was the result of that?
Presumptive test for blood was positive, and the item was forwarded to the DNA section.
And how about, so here we have 131.1.2. What item is that from?
131.1.2 is the pants that were removed from item 131.
All right, and what was the result of the testing of that cutting?
The testing of 131.1.2.1 is the cutting from the right thigh area of the pants removed from item 131. That is a presumptive test was positive, or for blood was positive, and the item was forwarded to the DNA section.
Okay, now I'm going to move to your next report.
Okay.
All right. There you have item 22.1.
Yes, ma'am.
You see that? What is that item?
That is a swab taken from below address window on item 22.
And what was the result of that test?
Presumptive testing for blood was positive, and the item was forwarded to the DNA section.
And now I'm going to move to item 45.1. That is a swab, correct?
Correct.
And what did that swab come from?
The swab was from the right sleeve near the cuff of a black jacket Robert Comstock size XL from rear passenger seat of Chevy Impala.
And what was the result of that test?
Presumptive test for blood was positive, and the item was forwarded to the DNA section.
And was that the only swab, or are there several swabs from that particular item?
There were 2 other swabs from that particular item.
Okay. And want to move on to 49.
The multicolored shirt from Nathaniel Rowland.
And that one, that's one of those that tested negative, correct?
That is correct.
And does that mean that there's no blood anywhere, or just on the item that you tested?
You mean there's no blood anywhere on the shirt?
Correct.
I would have looked the entire shirt inside and out to see if there were any visual spots that appeared to be blood stains and tested those, and all of those tested negative.
And that would be different from item 50.1, correct?
That is correct.
And what was item 50?
Item 50 is a pair of black socks from Nathaniel Rowland.
And what was the result of that test?
The cutting from the heel area of the pair of black socks from Nathaniel Rowland is 50.1, and the presumptive testing for blood was positive, and the item was forwarded to the DNA section.
And what about item 51.1?
That is a cutting from the right shoulder area of gray Puma hoodie from Nathaniel Rowland, and the presumptive testing for blood was positive, and the item was forwarded to the DNA section.
All right. And how about item 54.1.1? 54.1.1
54.1.1 is a cutting from from bandana from Nathaniel Rowland, and presumptive testing for blood was positive, and the item was forwarded to DNA section.
Want to move your attention to the 128.3.
128.3 swabs taken from interior of Dollar General bag from item 128. Presumptive test for blood was positive, and the item was forwarded to the DNA section.
What about 128.4?
128.4 were swabs from the interior of IGA bag from item 128. Presumptive test for blood was positive, and the item was forwarded to the DNA section.
And item 130.3?
130.3 are swabs taken from along open edge of item 130. Presumptive testing for blood was positive, and the item was forwarded to the DNA section.
And what about 130.4?
130.4 is swabs taken from the interior of cardboard roll from item 130. Presumptive testing for blood was positive, and the item was forwarded to the DNA section.
And there was also hair collected on your report, correct?
I do believe there was, yes, ma'am.
And is it your job to test the hair, or does that go to somebody else to do?
I evaluate the hair to see if a root is present, because SLED's DNA analysis will only work on root material on hair. And if the root material is present, then the hair is forwarded on for further testing. If root material is not present, then it is not sent for further testing.
Beg the court's indulgence. No further questions this time around.
By the defense.
Please, Court, Your Honor.
Yes.
Please, Court, Your Honor.
Yes.
How are you?
I'm well, and you?
Good. It's going to be very brief. You said that some of the items that were originally submitted to you, you did not do any sort of presumptive test on.
There are some, yes, ma'am.
Okay, you went ahead and just forwarded that onto DNA.
That is correct.
And you yourself don't do any sort of DNA processing or comparisons?
I don't do the developing of the DNA profile nor the comparison, no, ma'am.
And I believe Ms. Sampson asked you about one of the swabs you took from a black jacket. But you swabbed that jacket more than once, right?
Yes, ma'am. Do you know the item number for that?
I believe it's 45, yeah. 45, item 45, I have it on page 2.
Okay, yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. There were 3 swabs taken from that jacket.
One was near the cuff.
45.1 was the right sleeve near the cuff of the black jacket.
45.2 is the upper right and lower left area of the black jacket.
That is correct.
And then 45.3 was the interior neck area of that black jacket.
It's a swab from scraping the interior neck area of the black jacket.
What does that mean?
That means that we take a piece of, it's a sterile plastic single-use scraper, and scrape areas that potentially touch someone's body as they're wearing the item, try to determine who was wearing the item. So the neck area of that jacket was scraped in an attempt to collect skin cells of the person that may have been wearing it.
Begging the court's indulgence.
Redirect.
No, sir.
Thank you. You may step down. Do you have a 10-minute witness?
No, sir.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we will break for lunch. And we will come back at 2:15. 2:15. Please do not discuss the case.